greatest battles are not fought on battlefields, but inside the human mind. We imagine wars as clashes of swords, as the thunder of cannons, as armies colliding with banners waving in the wind. But the deepest wars, the most decisive ones, unfold in silence, hidden within the human heart. There the enemies are not soldiers or kings, but ancient forces that have stalked humanity since the beginning: desire, fear, and anger. These three are the invisible enemies. They are universal. They strike the poor as much as the wealthy, the weak as much as the powerful. No one is immune. You can sit on a throne or in a prison cell. It makes no difference. The war still rages. Desire pulls us forward, endlessly whispering that life will be better, happier, more complete, if only we can reach what we do not yet have. A promotion, a partner, a new possession, a better version of ourselves. Desire is never satisfied, because it is built on the illusion that fulfillment lies in the future, somewhere just out of reach. Fear, by contrast, pulls us back. Where desire seduces us with promises, fear terrifies us with possibilities. It fills the imagination with shadows, rehearsing dangers that may never come to pass. Fear of loss, fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of death. Fear is an artist that paints vivid pictures of disaster on the walls of our mind until we stop moving altogether, paralyzed by the possibility of pain. And then there is anger. Anger is the explosion, the fire that consumes the mind when the world refuses to obey us. It may flare suddenly at a slight insult, or smolder quietly for years as resentment, waiting for its chance to erupt. Anger makes us irrational, blinds us, and often destroys more than it protects. These three, desire, fear, anger, are not random emotions. They are primal forces, deeply wired into our biology. They once served us. Desire pushed us to seek food, mates, shelter. Fear kept us alive in dangerous environments. Anger rallied us to defend ourselves and our tribes. But in the modern world, these instincts often misfire. The brain cannot distinguish between a lion in the grass and a critical comment on social media, between hunger for survival and hunger for luxury, between the need to defend life and the urge to defend pride. And so, we are left fighting a war on two fronts, against the challenges of the world outside and against the turmoil inside. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments concerning them." The world itself is neutral. What torments us are the stories we tell ourselves about the world, the meanings we attach, the expectations we cling to. And at the root of these stories, we often find desire, fear, or anger pulling the strings. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, faced invasions, betrayals, and plagues. Yet, in the solitude of his private journal, he did not write about armies or politics as his greatest challenge. Instead, he wrote about controlling his mind. His reminder to himself was simple: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Think about that. A man with the literal power of life and death over millions still recognized that the true arena of control was internal, not external. He could command legions, but he could not command the weather or the loyalty of others or the course of fate. He could, however, command his own thoughts if he disciplined them. This insight is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it means the key to freedom is within our reach. Terrifying because it means we cannot blame the outside world for everything we suffer. The war is ours to fight. Modern psychology confirms what the ancients intuited. Our desires are fueled by dopamine loops, spikes of pleasure at the pursuit of something new, followed by rapid drops once we obtain it. Our fears are often overestimations of risk, cognitive distortions amplified by imagination. And our anger is frequently less about the event itself than about how we interpret it. Our sense of injustice, our wounded pride, our unmet expectations. But here's the catch. Knowing this is not enough. Knowledge does not defeat these enemies. Practice does. Daily, disciplined practice. That is why philosophy, for the Stoics, was not an abstract theory, but a form of training, a kind of spiritual exercise designed to toughen the mind against the assaults of desire, fear, and anger. They treated life as a campaign, a long campaign, where the mind must be drilled like a soldier. Imagine waking each morning and preparing yourself, not for traffic, emails, or meetings, but for war, not against other people, but against the impulses that will rise in you throughout the day. A temptation to chase recognition, a fear of rejection, an insult that stings and makes your blood boil. These are not accidents, they are battles. Seneca described anger as a kind of madness. He wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." He urged his readers to create space between the spark and the flame, to refuse to be carried away by the initial surge of emotion. In other words, the mind must learn to stand guard. Desire, too, requires a guard. The Stoics practiced what they called negative visualization, imagining the loss of what they cherished, so that gratitude would replace craving, and detachment would soften the sting of longing. Fear, on the other hand, they met with courage by rehearsing worst-case scenarios, premeditatio malorum, not to wallow in dread, but to shrink the unknown down to its true size. Each of these practices was a maneuver in the war within. When you see it this way, life takes on a new clarity. Every frustration, every setback, every temptation becomes a chance to train, to test your defenses. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and instead begin asking, "How can I respond to this as a warrior of the mind?" Of course, none of us win every battle. Even the Stoics admitted failure. Marcus Aurelius chastised himself repeatedly in his journals, reminding himself to be patient, to avoid anger, to let go of vanity. His writings are not the words of a man who had achieved perfection, but of a man who was fighting daily against himself. That honesty is perhaps the most inspiring lesson of all. The invisible enemies cannot be destroyed once and for all. They return in new disguises, in new circumstances, in new temptations. But they can be weakened. Their grip can loosen. And over time, with practice, the war within shifts. You stop being a helpless victim of impulse, and you begin to act from reason, from principle, from inner freedom. This, the ancients knew, is the true measure of power. Not wealth, not fame, not victory in battle. The power to govern yourself. In the end, desire, fear, and anger are not simply emotions to be suppressed or eliminated. They are signals, energies, movements of the soul. When harnessed, they can even be transformed. Desire can become ambition in service of virtue. Fear can sharpen vigilance and prepare us for challenges. Anger, when purified, can become righteous indignation against injustice. But this alchemy requires awareness, patience, and above all, discipline. So the first step is recognition. To see clearly that your greatest enemy is not the obstacle in front of you, but the turbulence within you. The second step is preparation. to arm yourself with practices, reflection, journaling, mindfulness, negative visualization that train your mind for the daily battle. And the third step is persistence. To return again and again to the war within, knowing it will never end, but also knowing that each victory, however small, builds strength, freedom, and clarity. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. These words are not ancient relics. They are a call to arms. The invisible enemy is already here. The question is not whether the battle will come. It already has. The question is, will you fight or will you surrender? Before we go deeper, let me ask you, have you noticed which of these inner enemies creeps into your life the most? Desire, fear, or anger? Drop it in the comments. You'll be surprised how many others struggle with the same. If fear chains us back, then desire pulls us endlessly forward. It is the whisper in the mind that says, just one more. One more achievement, one more possession, one more experience, and then, finally, contentment will arrive. But the truth, as the philosophers and sages have long reminded us, is that desire is a tyrant. It rules not with chains and whips, but with promises. It lures us into believing that happiness lies just beyond our grasp. And once we obtain what we sought, it quickly fades, only to be replaced by another craving. The Buddha called this cycle tanha, thirst. He taught that suffering arises not simply from pain, but from the endless grasping of the mind, the inability to rest with what is. To crave is to cling, and to cling is to suffer, because everything we cling to is impermanent. The Stoics, though not Buddhists, arrived at a similar conclusion. Epictetus taught his students that freedom does not come from having more, but from wanting less. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, he said, but in having few wants. Arthur Schopenhauer, centuries later, would echo this ancient wisdom with brutal clarity. For him, life was not a story of happiness punctuated by occasional suffering. It was suffering punctuated by brief moments of relief. He wrote, "All striving springs from want or deficiency, from dissatisfaction with one's condition, and is therefore suffering so long as it is not satisfied. No satisfaction, however, is lasting. It is always merely the starting point of fresh striving." In other words, to live in the grip of desire is to live in an endless cycle of longing, brief relief, and renewed longing. We don't need a philosopher to tell us this. We can observe it in our daily lives. Consider consumerism, the religion of desire in modern times. We are told relentlessly that happiness can be purchased. A new phone, a new car, a bigger home. Each promise shines brightly until the novelty fades and the object becomes ordinary. Then we turn our gaze to the next product, the next upgrade. The cycle continues. Or take social validation. We seek approval in the form of likes, comments, compliments. Each notification offers a tiny burst of satisfaction, yet the feeling evaporates almost instantly. The craving for recognition never ends, because external validation cannot secure internal peace. And addictions, whether to substances, to gambling, to pornography, or simply to scrolling on a glowing screen, are desire's purest form. They reveal desire's true nature, insatiable, restless, and enslaving. Modern psychology gives us a language the ancients lacked, but the insights align. Neuroscience shows that desire is mediated by dopamine, the neurotransmitter of pursuit, not satisfaction. Dopamine spikes when we anticipate a reward, not when we obtain it. That is why the chase is often more thrilling than the capture. Once the object is secured, dopamine drops, and boredom or emptiness quickly follows. This is why people binge, why gamblers keep pulling the lever, why we refresh social media feeds endlessly. The brain has been hijacked by dopamine loops designed for survival in scarce environments, but now exploited by modern abundance. So how do we resist this tyranny? How do we step out of the cycle of craving and disappointment? The Stoics and Buddhists both offered practices, mental disciplines, that weaken desire's grip. One of the most powerful is negative visualization. Instead of focusing on what we lack, we imagine losing what we already have. We picture the absence of our possessions, our comforts, even our loved ones. This sounds harsh, even cruel, but its purpose is the opposite: to awaken gratitude, to remind us that the present is already full, already fleeting, already worthy of reverence. Seneca advised his students to practice this often. He wrote, "He robs present ills of their power, who has perceived their coming beforehand." By rehearsing loss, we stop clinging so tightly. And by imagining absence, we learn to appreciate presence. Another Stoic exercise was voluntary discomfort. They would deliberately live with less, sleeping on the floor, wearing coarse clothing, eating plain food, not as punishment, but as training. By exposing themselves to deprivation, they proved to themselves that they could endure it. And once you know you can endure, desire loses its power to intimidate. Modern psychology calls this delayed gratification. The famous marshmallow test on children showed that those who could resist a small, immediate reward for a larger one later often enjoyed greater success in life. But the Stoics would add, even beyond success, delayed gratification gives freedom. Because if you can master your impulses, you are no longer a slave to them. The point is not to eliminate desire entirely. To desire health, wisdom, friendship, these are natural and often noble. The problem is not desire itself, but being ruled by it. When desire dictates our choices, when it becomes the master rather than the servant, then we live in bondage. Imagine a man who constantly chases wealth. No matter how much he earns, it is never enough. He looks at his neighbor's house, his colleague's car, the lifestyles paraded online. His desires multiply faster than his means. Outwardly, he may look successful, but inwardly he is restless, unfulfilled. He does not possess wealth. Wealth possesses him. Now imagine another man of modest means. He trains himself to enjoy simple meals, modest clothing, small comforts. He does not reject pleasure, but he does not cling to it either. When fortune brings him abundance, he enjoys it without attachment. When fortune takes it away, he adapts as without despair. This man is free because his happiness is not chained to circumstance. That is the paradox. The less we demand from life, the more life gives us. Gratitude grows where craving ends. The Buddha used the metaphor of a flame. Desire, he said, is like fire. It consumes whatever it touches, always reaching for more fuel. Left unchecked, it burns endlessly. But if we learn to watch the flame without feeding it, it weakens. Eventually, it extinguishes, leaving peace. The Stoics might not speak of extinguishing desire entirely, but they sought a similar peace, ataraxia, tranquility of mind. And tranquility is impossible if one is constantly pulled by longing. So the task before us is not to renounce the world, but to change our relationship to it. To see through the promises of desire, to recognize its insatiable nature, and to practice freedom by loosening its grip. We can begin small. Tonight, when you eat, pause and imagine not having this meal. Imagine true hunger, then savor each bite with gratitude. Or tomorrow, leave your phone aside for an hour. Notice the restlessness, the itch to check. Sit with it. You will discover that the craving fades, that you do not die without it. Or spend a night without comfort, no heating, no soft bed. You will see that you can endure far more than you think. And once you know that, desire loses its tyranny. Epictetus put it simply, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And most of what we desire lies beyond our control. Fortune, reputation, possessions, the opinions of others. To anchor our happiness, there is to anchor it in the shifting tides of chance. So let us return to the battlefield of the mind. Here stands desire, dressed as a friend, promising us joy if we will only obey. But when we see it clearly, we recognize the trick. We remember the words of the philosophers. We practice gratitude for what we have, resilience against loss, discipline against craving. And slowly, the tyrant weakens. The war within continues, but we have claimed a victory. For the greatest wealth, the truest abundance, is not found in accumulation. It is found in contentment. Quick pause. If you've ever felt trapped by endless wanting, whether it's money, attention, or things, hit the like button. It tells me this is striking a chord, and it helps this message reach more people who need it. If desire is the tyrant that pulls us endlessly forward, then fear is the jailer that holds us back. Fear is the anticipation of suffering. It is the mind's ability to project itself into the future and imagine pain, danger, or loss before it ever happens. And in doing so, fear robs us not only of courage, but of peace in the present. Seneca put it sharply, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Think about that. How often has the fear of something been worse than the thing itself? We lie awake worrying about rejection, failure, illness, death. And yet when these moments finally arrive, they are often less catastrophic than we imagined, or they pass more quickly than we expected. The mind, left unchecked, can be a factory of ghosts, manufacturing terrors that never come to life. Fear, however, is not an enemy without purpose. Evolution designed it to protect us. Our ancestors who felt fear at the rustling of grass, at the darkening sky, at the growl of a predator, those were the ones who survived. Fear sharpened their senses, primed their bodies to fight or flee. In its rawest form, fear is a survival tool. But the modern world has distorted fear. The threats that once justified it, wild animals, starvation, tribal conflict, are largely absent from daily life. Yet the ancient circuitry of the brain remains. It still reacts as if every threat is life or death. Instead of lions, we now fear emails. Instead of starvation, we fear losing status. Instead of tribal warfare, we fear the disapproval of strangers. Social anxiety is fear misplaced. Our heart races, our palms sweat, as if rejection were a mortal danger. Yet the worst that can happen is embarrassment, a fleeting discomfort. Fear of failure, too, cripples countless lives. The fear of starting a project, launching a business, speaking up in a meeting. Failure feels fatal, even though it is often the very thing that teaches us what we need most. Nietzsche saw through this illusion. He He wrote that growth requires risk, danger, exposure. A man who wills command must be able to command himself. A man who wills to be free must be able to risk his life. To Nietzsche, fear was not something to be avoided, but something to be confronted, even embraced. Life, at its highest intensity, he argued, comes when we stand at the edge of danger, when we risk, when we gamble. The Stoics would not disagree. They taught not recklessness, but resilience. And their method for disarming fear was not to run from it, but to look it in the eye. One of their most practical tools was premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Each morning, a Stoic might sit and imagine everything that could go wrong that day. Insult, injury, betrayal, loss, even death. Not to dwell in dread, but to shrink fear down to its true size. For once you have rehearsed disaster in your mind, it loses much of its sting. Seneca described this plainly. Rehearse them in your mind, exile, torture, war, shipwreck. All the terms of our human lot should be before our eyes. To prepare for misfortune is to rob it of its surprise, and surprise is what gives fear much of its power. Modern psychology echoes this. Exposure therapy, the practice of gradually facing what we fear, works precisely because fear collapses under direct confrontation. What is vague and monstrous in the imagination often shrinks to manageable proportions in reality. Think of the child terrified of the dark. In their mind, the dark is filled with creatures, monsters, ghosts. But when the light is turned on, the fear vanishes instantly. Nothing has changed except perception. Fear lived only in imagination. Or consider public speaking, often ranked as one of the greatest fears. Anticipation fills us with dread. Yet once we step onto the stage, begin speaking, the fear often evaporates within minutes. The reality is rarely as unbearable as the anticipation. Fear collapses when faced directly. That is its paradoxical weakness. The prison door is not locked, it is only imagined. But fear, left unexamined, can quietly dictate the shape of our lives. How many relationships are never pursued because of fear of rejection? How many careers are never begun because of fear of failure? How many words go unsaid? How many lives remain unlived because fear whispers, "It is safer to stay here." To live in fear is to live in a prison without bars. So how do we escape? First, by recognizing fear for what it is. Anticipation, not reality. To say, "I am afraid," is often to say, "I am imagining pain that has not yet happened." Second, by practicing premeditatio malorum. Write down your fears. Spell them out in detail. What is the worst that could happen? Could you survive it? Could you adapt? More often than not, the imagined worst case is survivable, even instructive. Third, by deliberate exposure. Do the thing you fear in small doses until its grip weakens. If you fear rejection, practice it. Ask for something small, expect refusal. If you fear failure, deliberately attempt something where success is uncertain. Each time you face fear, you chip away at its illusion. Finally, by remembering that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Even the bravest feel fear. The difference is that they move anyway. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." To avoid life because of fear is to betray the very gift of existence. Nietzsche pushed this further. He saw fear as the crucible of greatness. "Build your cities on the slopes of Vesuvius," he urged. live dangerously. For only there do we test ourselves, discover ourselves, transcend ourselves. The Stoics would temper this with prudence, but they would agree on the core point. To grow, we must step into fear, not retreat from it. Think of your life as a map. Fear draws invisible lines on that map, saying, "Do not cross here. Do not step beyond this point." And slowly, the territory of your life shrinks until you are confined to a narrow strip of safe routines. To confront fear is to redraw the map, to expand the territory of freedom. The prison of fear is built from imagination, anticipation, illusion. But its walls collapse when we walk through them. The choice, then, is not between a life without fear and a life with it. The choice is between a life ruled by fear and a life in which fear becomes a signal to act. Seneca, again, offers the simplest counsel. We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality. If you remember nothing else, remember this. When fear arises, pause and ask, is this happening now? Or am I living in a shadow of what might happen? That question alone is often enough to break fear's spell. In the end, fear is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a teacher. It points to where we are vulnerable, where we still have something to learn, where we still need to grow. To follow fear, to face it, is to discover strength. So the next time fear whispers, remember, the prison is unlocked. The door is open. All that remains is to step through. Let me ask, what's one fear you know is holding you back right now? Share it below. Just putting it into words can already loosen its grip. Anger is the most seductive of the passions. It whispers promises of justice, of strength, of power. In the moment, it feels like a fire that cleanses, that rights a wrong, that avenges an insult. But the Stoics saw it differently. They called anger a form of temporary madness. Seneca, in his work on anger, wrote, "Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it." This is a brutal truth. Anger often causes more damage to the angry than to the one who provoked it. The insult lasts for a moment. The anger it sparks can ruin years, relationships, even entire lives. Think about the chain reaction. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The event itself lasts less than 2 seconds. But then comes the interpretation. This person disrespected me. This person endangered me. They must be punished. That interpretation feeds rage, and rage demands action. You speed up, you shout, you curse. Now the fire spreads. It consumes your calm, your focus, your peace of mind. By the time you arrive at your destination, the original incident is gone, but the anger remains, burning through you like acid. The Stoics warned that once the flame of anger is lit, reason is the first casualty. Seneca described it as an enemy that seizes the mind like a conqueror seizes a city. Once inside, it topples judgment, blinds perception, and leaves you in ruins. We see this everywhere today. Online outrage cycles dominate social media. An offensive comment, a misunderstood post, a controversial headline, it doesn't matter if the trigger is trivial. Within minutes, waves of anger ripple across millions of people. The chain reaction is amplified, globalized, and monetized. Platforms profit from our outrage. But the cost to us: fractured attention, broken friendships, anxiety, division. Road rage is another perfect example. Studies show most drivers believe they're better than average, so any slight on the road feels like an attack on one's identity. The result? People swerving, shouting, sometimes escalating to violence, all over a few seconds of perceived disrespect. Anger turns a small inconvenience into a battle of egos. Politics, too, thrives on this fire. Leaders and media figures weaponize anger because it motivates people faster than reason or compassion. Outrage brings clicks, donations, votes. But once again, it destroys more than it builds. Anger polarizes, divides, and blinds entire populations. The Stoics were not naive. They knew that injustice exists. They knew that harm is real. But they drew a line between constructive action and destructive rage. Anger does not make you strong. It makes you reckless. True strength is the ability to respond without losing control. Seneca wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Just a pause, just enough time to insert reason between stimulus and response. Modern psychology confirms this. When anger rises, the amygdala in the brain hijacks rational thought. But if you can wait just 90 seconds, neuroscientists say, the chemical surge of anger begins to fade. The fire loses fuel. Practical exercises can help us master this. The first is simple. Pause, observe, respond. When you feel the spark of anger, don't act immediately. Instead, narrate it in your mind. I feel anger rising. My pulse is faster. My jaw is tight. By observing, you create distance. You remind yourself that you are not your anger. You are the observer of it. Another practice is journaling. At the end of each day, write down the moments that provoked you. Who or what triggered your anger? How did you respond? Could you have paused? Could you have chosen differently? Over time, this habit uncovers patterns. Maybe the same colleague annoys you every week. Maybe hunger makes you short-tempered. Maybe scrolling online late at night feeds irritation. Awareness is the first step toward mastery. The Stoics also recommended perspective. Marcus Aurelius asked, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it?" Reflect on that. The insult might sting for a moment, but your furious reply could haunt you for years. The disrespect of a stranger is nothing compared to the damage of destroying your own peace. We can also apply negative visualization here. Imagine the consequences of your anger before it erupts. If you scream at your partner, what will that do to your relationship? If you lash out at your colleague, what will that do to your career? By rehearsing the aftermath, you make it easier to stop yourself in the present. And finally, voluntary discomfort. The Stoics trained themselves to endure small annoyances so that greater provocations would not unbalance them. Stand in line without checking your phone. Let someone cut ahead in traffic without honking. Practice patience in small things, and anger loses its grip in larger ones. The Stoics saw anger not as power, but as weakness. To conquer anger is to reclaim your sovereignty over yourself. Imagine being unshakable in the face of insults. Imagine watching the fires of rage burn around you without being consumed. That is the strength they pursued. Not the illusion of control through violence, but the reality of control through reason. Seneca concluded on anger with a warning. No plague has cost the human race more. Wars, murders, betrayals, all fueled by this single passion. If we can master it, we cut the fuse before the explosion. So the question is not whether you will be provoked. Life guarantees it. The question is whether you will let the fire of anger consume you, or whether you will stand above it, calm and unshaken, a master of yourself. If you've seen how anger burns bridges in your life, whether online or face-to-face, make sure you subscribe. The next videos will give you practical tools to break free from it. The battle against desire, fear, and anger is not a battle we win once. It is a battle fought daily, moment by moment, decision by decision. These forces, cravings that chain us, fears that shrink us, and anger that consumes us, are not strangers lurking outside of us. They are woven into the very fabric of human existence. No one escapes them. Not emperors, not philosophers, not saints. Even Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the known world, admitted in his meditations that every morning he had to prepare himself for the insults, the betrayals, and the frustrations he knew awaited him. And yet, if no one is free of these forces, how do we stand a chance? The answer is not to erase them, but to arm ourselves against them. Philosophy, at its core, is not idle speculation about the nature of the stars. It is a discipline of the mind, a training ground for the soul, a stockpile of weapons ready to be drawn when desire tempts us, fear paralyzes us, or anger blinds us. The Stoics, the Epicureans, and the Buddhists all knew this. They left us arsenals, practical toolkits that can be carried into the heat of battle. And their genius lies not only in their insights, but in their daily practices. Habits that sharpen the mind, condition the spirit, and fortify us against ambush. Marcus Aurelius gives us the first weapon, the practice of morning reflection. He would rise at dawn, often reluctant to leave the warmth of his bed, and remind himself of his duties. In one entry, he writes, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil." This is not cynicism. It is preparation. He knew that life would confront him with difficulty, that others would frustrate his plans, that insults would cut into him if he was unguarded. So he armed himself in advance. Morning reflection is a shield, a way of entering the day not with naive optimism, but with hardened realism. We too can practice this. Each morning ask, what challenges will I face today? What desires will tempt me? What fears might shake me? Who might provoke my anger? By foreseeing the battle, we blunt the enemy's surprise attack. The second weapon is evening journaling, given to us by Seneca. After his day of politics, debate, and struggle, he would retire to solitude and examine his actions. When the light has been taken away, and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and measure my words and deeds. I hide nothing from myself. I pass over nothing. Evening journaling is not about recording events. It is about holding trial. Where did desire capture me today? Where did fear shrink me? Where did anger carry me away? It is a mirror held up to the soul. And just as a soldier cleans and sharpens his sword each night, journaling keeps our inner weapons honed. It transforms mistakes into lessons and prevents the same enemy from ambushing us twice. The third weapon comes from the Buddha, mindful detachment. Where the Stoics taught us to brace for the world and review our actions, the Buddha taught us to watch the mind itself. He observed that desire, fear, and anger arise as thoughts, like clouds drifting across the sky. The tragedy is that we grasp them as if they were solid, real, eternal. But in truth, they are fleeting, passing states of mind. To watch them without clinging is to disarm them. Modern neuroscience confirms this. When we name a thought, this is desire, this is fear, this is anger. The amygdala, the brain's alarm bell, quiets. Awareness dissolves the illusion of permanence. The storm still rages, but we are no longer swept away by it. Mindful detachment is the practice of standing on the shore and watching the waves crash instead of being dragged under. Together, these practices form a triad of discipline. Morning reflection prepares us. Evening journaling refines us. Mindful detachment steadies us in the present. And make no mistake, without daily training, philosophy is useless. Reading Marcus or Seneca or the Buddha without practicing their methods is like admiring a sword while leaving it sheathed in the heat of battle. The arsenal must be used, not admired. Perhaps you resist this discipline. Perhaps you think, I do not have time to reflect in the morning, or to journal at night, or to meditate in the day. But then you must ask, do you have time to suffer needlessly from unchecked desire, paralyzing fear, and consuming anger? The hours you save by skipping practice will be stolen tenfold by inner turmoil. The truth is this: every day you either sharpen your weapons or dull them. Every day you either prepare for the invisible enemy or leave yourself exposed. And the enemy does not rest. Desire will whisper, fear will shadow, anger will flare. The only question is whether you meet them with armor or bare skin. This is why Marcus wrote his meditations not for us, but for himself. Why Seneca wrote letters that read like pep talks to his own mind. Why the Buddha urged his monks to sit, breathe, and observe each day. They were arming themselves. They were sharpening their blades. And so must we. For philosophy is not a book to be read, but a practice to be lived. It is the arsenal we carry into battle, not once, but every day. These daily practices are small, but their impact compounds. Which one would you try first? Morning reflection, evening journaling, or mindful detachment? Comment your choice. I read every reply. The war within is never won once and for all. It is not a single battle with a decisive ending. It is a campaign that stretches across the span of your entire life. Every morning when you wake, desire, fear, and anger rise from the shadows, eager to reclaim their territory. Every night, you can measure the ground you either lost or gained. This is why the ancients insisted that philosophy is not theory. It is practice. To live free is not to be without chains on your wrists, but without chains on your mind. True mastery is not dominion over others, but dominion over yourself. As Epictetus declared, no man is free who is not master of himself. The victory you seek is not dramatic. It doesn't come with trumpets, banners, or applause. It comes quietly, in small acts of discipline. When you want what you don't need, and you let it pass. When fear whispers its lies, and you move forward anyway. When anger boils, and you choose stillness over destruction. Each moment of resistance is a sword drawn in battle. Each refusal to be ruled by impulse is a victory banner planted within your soul. But remember, this is not a call to suppress or to deny. Desire, fear, anger, these are not demons to be destroyed, but forces to be understood, redirected, and mastered. Like fire, they can warm your home or burn it to the ground. Mastery is learning to tend the flame without letting it consume you. And so the question is no longer if you will fight this war. You are already in it. The only question is, will you fight it well? Today, Reflect on this. Which enemy has the strongest grip on you? Desire, fear, or anger? Where does it show itself in your daily life? And what would victory look like? Not tomorrow, not in theory, but today. The war within is eternal. But so too is your capacity for strength. The greatest freedom is not given to you. It is claimed by conquering yourself. The truth is, desire, fear, and anger will always return, but mastery is choosing how you respond each time. Which one of these three enemies rules you most today? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. And if this battle for inner freedom matters to you, subscribe now so you don't fight it alone. Each week, I'll share more timeless weapons for the war within.